runner? If you are a runner, do you worry about getting injured? If so, I've got some tips for you. Let's get into it. Okay, before we get started, I do have to say that these tips, they're quite basic, but if you have been running for a long time, then sometimes it's good for us to just remember the basics, back to basics. But I did come across an article in the Marathon Handbook. It's marathonhandbook.com, and of course I'll place a link in the show notes in case you want to read the whole article. This video is a very condensed version of that article, and basically it's just me reading the subheadings and then complaining about whether I'm doing it or not doing it enough. But perhaps if you're a new runner, you'll get something out of this and something will click, and maybe you will not get an injury. So I think it's pretty safe to say that if you watch this video and you don't get an injury, maybe it's because of this video. And of course, if you do get an injury, then I have to say that this video is for entertainment purposes only. But anyway, the number one way to avoid getting injured is to avoid overtraining. Ever heard of that? Yeah, that's right. The number one way to avoid getting injured is to avoid overtraining. Don't train too much. Of course, there's the old adage that it's better to be 10% undertrained than 1% overtrained, and I would agree with that. And very quickly, very nutshellish, overtraining is when you do too much and your body can't keep up with the demands that you're putting on it. If you do wear a running watch, fitness watch, and you sort of track your heart rate or you track your HRV, you might notice your resting heart rate creeping up a bit. If you're always feeling fatigued, if you're always feeling tired, that could have something to do with it. The article says that if you have trouble focusing or you're finding it hard to sleep, that could come down to overtraining. Of course, there are also a million other things that could be due to, but we're not going to get into all those things. I know that pretty much the only time that I really find it difficult to sleep is after a race. And perhaps that's because I've pushed my body too hard that I'm just not calming down or my legs are aching. And in that case, it's not overtraining, it's just racing. But as soon as I started telling you about the only time that I have trouble sleeping, I realized that every couple months I do have issues for a couple nights sleeping. And I always put it down to maybe getting too much sleep in the nights before not being able to sleep. But I suppose it could just as easily be overtraining. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell on it. The number two way, according to this article, to avoid running injuries is to correct your running form. Now, I could dig a little deeper and tell you how to correct your running form, but in all honesty, I'm not a coach. And although there are like the standard things that we always hear, like making sure your arms don't cross your center line, keeping your shoulders relaxed and back, I also think that if we run a way that works for us, that changing it could lead to injury. Maybe not. Maybe if you correct something, it could prevent injury. But I think there is more recent research that points to running in a way that actually works for us. But saying that, if you actually run more, that actually teaches your body to run better. So correct your running form, maybe by running a little more often. I don't know. What do you think? Have you actually taken steps to correct something about your running form? I think I remember several comments talking about increasing cadence and how they went about doing that. For me, at least, I think I'm a bit of a shuffle runner. So if I ever tried to run beautifully, run gracefully, like I see some of these top-notch runners doing, I think it would be very inefficient for me to do that. And I probably wouldn't be able to run very far if I ran correctly. So let's move on to number three. The number three way of preventing a running injury is to get your shoes fitted professionally. And yeah, I don't know. I can't really say anything about that because honestly, I've never had my shoes fitted professionally. If I'm totally honest, I buy all my shoes online right now. A lot of shoes get sent to me, as you know, and I just order my size. If it's the wrong size, then I will order another size that I think works better. Now, what I have found in my testing of running shoes is that some shoes just work for me a little better than other shoes. Some shoes feel good, but they just don't feel good on the run. And I think maybe that getting fitted professionally could identify which shoes would work for me better. But honestly, I think comfort is king. And if a shoe feels good on your foot, I don't know. Do we need to dig any deeper than that? Maybe. I'm sure there's a lot of money to be made in the foot scanning technology that these running shops use. But as I've never used it and I seem to have pretty good results with my running shoes, can't really say anything about that. But if you have done that, if you have gone into a running shop and had your feet professionally fitted, sometimes they'll scan your foot, sometimes they'll put you on a treadmill and they'll have a camera filming you as you run. Let me know in the comments and let me know how it worked out. Are the running shoes that you bought after that fitting working for you? Do they work better than other shoes that you didn't get professionally fitted? I'd love to know. The fourth way to prevent an injury is to warm up before you run. This one I have really adopted maybe in the last year or two. And you know what I put it down to? I put it down to me gradually getting older. Because I know that like 10, 15 years ago when I started running, I would never warm up. In fact, I would roll out of bed and I'd go for a run like within 10 minutes of waking up. Now, it seems like I have to sit down for an hour with a cup of coffee and then I put my shoes on and then I'll do some leg swings, I'll do some lunges, I'll do some squats. Got the whole routine going on and it just makes going for a run that much easier in the beginning. Now, of course, I could just run out the door and immediately start running, but it's difficult. And I feel like I'm going to injure myself if I I do that. So for now, for me, I'm going to continue to do a very brief warm-up before I go for my run, because I know that my whole run benefits from it and I feel better the entire time. Number 5 is a good one. It's pretty broad, but the 5th way to prevent injury is to eat nourishing food. And although it sounds funny because it is so broad and it doesn't actually give you any direction on what to eat, you've just got to eat something that nourishes you. So even though it is kind of funny to hear, it is true, because when we're training, when we're putting in the effort, we're burning those calories, we're breaking down our muscles that need to be repaired to come back stronger, and that doesn't work if you're not eating enough. So I don't know what is the best diet out there. I tend to think that there is a different diet for everyone, or at least I should say that I think a lot of diets will work for a lot of people, and it's just what you decide to go all in out on any given day. So for me, what I found is that I just have to eat enough, and I don't really struggle with that. I do seem to eat a lot, and as it turns out, when I start training more, especially after I go for a long run or a particularly hard workout, I'm a little more hungry after, and I address that hunger by eating more nourishing food. So I think I'm on the right track. The only place that I see for improvement in my own life is after a race, because you know that we're not really hungry when we finish a big race, and yet I know that I have to eat, and I don't do it often. So that's what I'm going to try and change. At least for the couple of races that I've got planned in 2024, I'm really going to make an effort to eat as soon as I cross the finish line. Just get something in to start repairing my body, and I'll make a note to make sure it's nourishing. Moving on to number 6, the 6th way to prevent injury is to gradually increase your training load. And I think this pretty much goes hand in hand with the overtraining, and it reminds me of that old adage, the terrible twos: too much, too soon, too fast. If you do too much, that's kind of like the overtraining. If you do too soon, that's ignoring the gradually increasing your training load, and too fast kind of speaks for itself. But gradually increasing your training load, that's a big one. That's important to pay attention to, especially if you want to keep running for the long term. Of course, we always hear about the 10% rule. You never want to increase your volume more than 10% each week. And I know there are a lot of holes in that theory, and sometimes it works for some people and not for others. And if you're just getting started and you're going out for a 2-mile run, increasing that by 10% is pretty negligible. So clearly there are some caveats with the whole 10% thing, but overall I think it's a pretty good rule for people running in this range of volume. Correct me if I'm wrong. And after you're done correcting me on that, let me know how much you sleep, because the 7th way to prevent injuries is to get 8 hours of sleep a night, according to this article. Yes, 8 hours sleep a night would be nice. Some of us have jobs, have families, have other responsibilities that may stop us from getting an entire 8 hours of sleep a night. And of course, a lot of us are very different. We have different sleep needs. I know if I am left to my own devices, I will probably sleep 9.5 hours. And there are some nights when I need to get up early to go for a run because I've got to go to work all day. There are some nights I'll only get 6 hours of sleep a night. Now that really does come back to bite me after a couple of days of doing that, and I really think that if I didn't catch up on my sleep on my days off, that it would lead to injury. So I think we can probably avoid that by just sleeping 8 hours of sleep a night. I was kind of making fun of it when I first saw it because it's very precise. But yeah, I suppose if you sleep 8 hours of sleep a night, that's probably enough for most people. The 8th way to prevent injuries is to incorporate strength training into your routine. I almost said daily routine, but you don't have to do strength training every day. Maybe a couple times a week. Again, not a coach. Probably talk to someone who is a coach if you want some precise guidance. But strength training, I think we can all agree, is probably pretty good for us. In fact, I have said it before, I'll say it right now, I think it's the fountain of youth. We have to incorporate strength training, and it makes everything in our lives better. It certainly makes our running better, but also just picking stuff off the floor, or getting up off the sofa, or lifting a heavy package of running shoes from the front door into your house so you can try them on. There are a million examples of why we need strength, and strength training is going to help with that, and it's probably going to prevent injury. I think this is one of the better ones. And the 9th way to prevent a running injury is to incorporate cross training. So we've already got strength training, now we've got to incorporate cross training. Now that I think about it, of course, if we're not running, we're probably going to lower our chance of getting a running injuries, and it is something that I do on a weekly basis or several times a weekly basis. I have found that getting on the elliptical helps me scratch that cardio itch that I can't get with running, because if I had my own way, I would run a lot more than I do. But I'm kind of held back by the little aches and pains that I get once I get past a certain level of my running. So in order to supplement that, I do go on the elliptical fairly often. I do have a Peloton bike. I'm usually on that a couple times a week. And I'm actually a big proponent of cross training with our running. And you know, you may be one of those people that says, hey, if you want to get better with running, you have to run more. And that's true up to a point. But it's also not true. But that's just my opinion. And actually, the reason I make these videos is so you can give me your opinion. What do you think about those ways to prevent injuries? Which ones of them do you do? Which ones of them do you just ignore? Let me know in the comments. And if you have made it to this point in the video, because we've been talking about running injury, why don't you drop that the little face, the guy with the bandage around And by putting that emoji in the comments, it lets me know that you've made it to this point in the video, which I greatly appreciate. Gosh, I always forget to ask people to subscribe in my videos. And if you've made it to this point in the video, then it's likely that you've already subscribed. So I don't know. If you feel like it, share my channel with your running friends. I'd appreciate it. Kind of got an itch lately that I really need to grow the channel a little more. I mean, I've always got that itch, but something's been pushing me to do it just more than usual. Anyway, it's Matt B. This has been 9 tips, I don't know, suggestions on how to prevent running injuries. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.